Again, my name is Richard Taylor with Ideate Software, and thank you for joining me today for this short 30-minute webinar on Let's Purge Those Imported Styles, Cleaning Up Unwanted Styles with Ideate StyleManager. So just a real quick introduction about me. My background is architecture. I was fortunate enough to be one of the original employees at Revit Technology back 20 years ago. Revit Technology was acquired by Autodesk, and then I worked for Autodesk for about 14 years, various roles, and then I've worked for Ideate Software for about the last 5 years. You can always contact me at my email, richard.taylor@ideatesoftware.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, and I'd be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn as well if you'd like to send me a notice or send me a connection. So if you have any questions after the presentation, you can always contact me at richard.taylor@ideatesoftware.com. But we're here to talk about your Revit data challenges. And Ideate Software creates 5 add-on applications for Revit that you see there on the screen. Ideate BIMlink, Ideate Explorer, Ideate Sticky, Ideate Apps, and finally, Ideate StyleManager. Actually, Ideate StyleManager is our most recent solution that we just released in June of this year. So today we're going to be focusing on Ideate StyleManager and specifically talking about the imports that can start to clog your Revit model when you, let's say, import or link information from CAD files, whether that be MicroStation or AutoCAD or even IFC. Today we're going to be using examples from AutoCAD because that's probably the most common. And then a little bit about Ideate Software. As I said, we create 5 add-on applications to Revit, but I'd like you to know that we have excellent support. We have both in-product help information, so within the product itself, you can go and do a getting started guide, and then we also link out to our online help, where we have many tutorials and videos available for your review. Also, I'd like to say that we are supporting the last 4 releases of Revit, so that today, whatever you see, if you're working on Revit 2017, 2018, 2019, or 2020, all that functionality is available for you, and the latest updates, of course, are available on those last 4 releases. So we're here to talk about Ideate StyleManager. And like I said, specifically about looking at the imports. When you link in, and as I said, I'll use the example of an AutoCAD file. When you link in an AutoCAD file, you basically also import object styles and line styles and patterns that may or may not be part of your standards, and they can be really difficult to get rid of if you're not controlling them. So let's just take a little step back and look at what Ideate StyleManager is all about. So we developed StyleManager because not only AutoCAD, but let's say you're copying Revit information from one project to another, or you're importing content from a third-party source. This content can contain object styles, patterns, line styles, all kinds of standards, or I should say not standards, but really styles that are going to start to, for lack of a better word, infect your Revit model in the sense that they're not going to match maybe the standards that you have set forth or desire. So StyleManager is allowing you to review all this information, all these different styles, and then make educated decisions based on the analysis of that data. So really, when it comes down to it, Ideate StyleManager is 9 tools within one. The 9 tools allow you to sort of forensically analyze object styles, line patterns, fill patterns, materials, material appearance assets, filters, view templates, and scope boxes. So when we say analyze, are they being used in your Revit model? And if so, where are they being used in the Revit model? So that you can make educated decisions about how you want to handle them. So one of the decisions might be to merge the information from a non-approved style to an approved style. So I'm going to go through several examples of how you can merge or basically swap the information from one style to an approved style. And then there are many of these object styles or line styles or patterns that you'll find aren't even being used at all within the model. And so in order to create a very thin, or let's just say a facile model, we want to make sure that we reduce those. So we want to delete those out of our model if we're not using them. Because if you just sort of willy-nilly delete things, and in fact, Revit gives you the ability to look at these object styles as an example, or even these line styles, and remove them. You can just delete them. But it doesn't actually say, like, well, are they being used and what are the impacts? So for instance, in this particular case, the one I'm showing on the screen, if I were to delete this clearance object style, the subcategory, basically anything that was on clearance that had a gray RGB value and a dashed dot would then automatically be assigned to the parent category or parent object style, in this case plumbing fixtures. So it would become a solid black line. And that may or may not be what you want. And then all of a sudden your drawings are going to change if you go and delete this information. So it's really a liability not to understand where these things are being, or where these elements are being used, and what are their characteristics. So the agenda today, I'm going to specifically kind of give you an overview of how Ideate StyleManager works, but then we're specifically going to deep dive into deleting or merging styles coming from CAD. And when I mention CAD, like I said, it could be MicroStation, it could be AutoCAD, it could be IFC, or DXF, but primarily, I think people are primarily using AutoCAD. So the first thing we look at is that risk assessment, sort of an analyze, where are these elements actually being used? And so Ideate StyleManager is going to tell you where, in this case, like the example I'm showing you is the line style, it's being used in a view template, in different views, and also in different elements as well. So I just thought I'd take a quick spin here and just show you that in this particular case, we have a project that is a German project. And so maybe I'm not as familiar with all the different line styles and object styles, but we're going to review where they're being used, for instance. So if I look at this particular line style, you can see that it's being used in different view templates, in different view, and in different elements, in this case, a detailed filled region. And so if I want to kind of drill down and look at that information, I can look at that detailed filled region, and I was able to show or open up the view, and now I can look at that region, right, and look and specifically see that line style for Ausgießogen, again, a German project, is being used in that particular manner. So I can drill down and see exactly where it's being used and how many of the elements are using that particular, in this case, line style. And like I said, there are 9 individual sort of methods for reviewing these styles, the object styles all the way through scope boxes, but they all work very similar, or so that I'm going to be showing you primarily object styles and line styles today, but again, think about these as they're going to be working very similar across all of those. Okay, so let's talk specifically about deleting imports. That they may be messing up our printouts, or the exports aren't working correctly, or there's a whole host of issues that may come about when you import CAD data and you have all these particular styles. So I thought that I would just kind of start with the basics and show you a blank file, and then look at how we actually link or import CAD data in and how it changes the Revit project. So I'm going to switch over here to Revit, and you'll see actually this particular project is really, it's the sample. When you go ahead and you say create new project in Revit, and in this case I picked the architecture template, and so really when I come over here to my manage, my object styles, It's pretty light. These are all my default object styles that I have in the project, right? So that you're probably all familiar with this. And if I come over to imported objects, there is a default built-in object style called imports and families. And right now it's there, but it's not being used. Okay, but you're going to see how in a moment, we're going to see how this is shown when I actually link in or import a CAD object. So like I said, just real simple here. There's not much here. I did create one view, which is a drafting view called section detail. So we're going to come over to our insert, and I am going to, in this case, you could actually either link or import. Most of the problem comes when you import, so that's why I'm going to select this, and I've got a couple different AutoCAD files here. I'm going to select the section1.dwg, open that up, and we'll go ahead and fit that view. So now I'm going to unpin that. And just by linking, or I should say importing that in, right? Now, if I go to that same manage in Revit and the object styles, you'll notice that I have imported objects. And there is now, like I said, the default built-in category for if I was importing information like DWG information and families. We don't have a family, but we do have this section1.dwg. And if I expand on that, you'll see these are all of the layers, right, that are in that project with the different colors. And you can actually see that these layers have corresponded and basically created different object styles on the Revit side. But right now with this dialog, I can see the individual layers of AutoCAD, but I don't know if they're being used. Like for instance, this, if I, let's say, just expand on this to this machine bolt, structural section. If I were to, remove or delete this right here, which I can, I have no idea what I'm actually changing. So everything that was this green or I guess kind of a olive color green RGB color would actually be reset to the top level category, in this case, this section1.dwg. And that may not be exactly what I want. So first off, let's go to Ideate Software and select on StyleManager. And so if I go to StyleManager, I'm going to look at first the object styles. So here are all the object styles, and you can actually see now where it starts to say section 1 and then underneath. So we have up above are all the default object styles for this very simple project. If I want to untick, notice that up above there's some selections. Right now, all of them have not been analyzed, meaning I don't know where they are being used and I don't know how many. But what I can do is say, well, you know what? I want to untick the built-in object styles from Revit and just show me imported styles and those that have not been analyzed yet. So now notice over to the left, there's a question mark basically saying, I haven't analyzed these. So I can look at all of these. And then I can say, you know what? I want to use a shift, right? Select all of them and analyze. And then again, this is pretty small, so I can go ahead and do all of that. And then I can use the top headers here, whether it's the name or this number, to organize these. So I'm going to have all of them that are being used, as you see here at the top. And you'll actually see that I have this text, this L131, this def points. These are not being used at all. So right off the bat, I can go ahead and just delete them. I know that they're not being used, and I'm not going to impact any of the information within the display as far as line styles go. Now, if I look over here, so that's the object styles, right? And then I have line styles. And so here are all the line styles. And right now, they're actually, everything that's sort of italicized is built into Revit. And there are no line styles because we're still basically in we imported it in, but this is actually, like one basically large DWG file. So if I wanted to sort of either explode or partially explode, now I can do that. So what I'm going to do over here is go over to the explode, and I'm going to do a partial explode, which basically means that, okay, if there are blocks in this project, and there might be some error messages here, which are just fine, but there are blocks that are now going to be still maintained, but then there are other things that are lines, right? So a lot of times what happens is you link in an AutoCAD file, and then you may inadvertently sort of explode partial things, and that's not exactly what you wanted, or the fact is that now there's still AutoCAD files here, and you think you're going to go and get rid of them. So in this case, I'm going to use another tool from Ideate Software called Ideate Explorer. I know I'm cheating a little bit by showing this, but it just is easy because I can go to the entire project and I can look at, now I have 16 CAD imports. And basically all of these are really blocks, or they're AutoCAD files that have basically were part of this original master AutoCAD file. So I may think that, okay, well, gee, you know what? I'm just going to tick on this CAD imports, 16 of them, and I'm going to get rid of them by going over here with Ideate Explorer and say delete. So notice I do not have any more CAD imports. And I think, okay, that's great. I got rid of all that stuff. But in fact, the object styles you see are still here, and they're still showing that, they're in use. And if I go ahead and do a shift and look at where they're being used here, I can go ahead and update that information. And then I can also come over here to the line styles, and you'll also know that, again, if I update the information, now because I exploded some of those, if I expand on this, you're going to see that there were lines that were created, and these lines that were created came from that AutoCAD file. You see your structural plan, section dimension, and so forth. So again, what I might want to do is say shift and analyze where these are being used. And so again, I can organize them based on their usage count. So looks like these are the default ones. The italics ones are the built-in line styles from this particular project. And you see, medium lines, center line, hidden. Those are all, a lot of them aren't even being used. But you'll see other ones here. Obviously, I think there's the wide lines. That's being used in a view template. And if I select on, for instance, this top line usage, this 213 instances of this, it's being used in that section detail. And you can see all of them are that section detail. So now I have the choice. Again, forensically, I've understood where these are being used. And I realized that, you know what? Okay, now that I sort of did that partial explode, I kind of need to clean this up. So here is where I can say, you know what? Okay, great. Let's take the first one, that 213, that line C241, and let's do a shift and select everything down to wide lines. I'm going to jump over wide lines here, and then I'm going to do a control, and I'm going to add these two more to it. So basically, I'm going to tell it to say, okay, those were all the line styles that were created when I did that partial explode. I would like to merge them over to one of my standards. So what it does is it shows me first off all of the lines that are within the import, but I don't want that. I actually want to have it be all the lines that are over here on the wide lines, and I'm going to merge that. And so what that does is it takes all those line styles and now merges them, in this particular case, to wide line style. And I can see all those. It gives me a nice little report here. It replaces all those. And so now, if I look at this and look at any one, let's zoom up on one of these things. Notice that it says that wide lines up here in the ribbon. So I've just now created all those, or swapped them to wide lines. And you'll notice that there are no imports. And in fact, I can shift and analyze all those just to make sure that there's no, now the wide lines, there are 385 total that are using that. And when I click on that wide lines, you can see those were the original two that were part of this project. The view, the wide lines was used in the silhouette edges on the view template, and a silhouette in the presentation elevation. And then down below, the elements, all those have now wide line style. And then for object styles, again, let's go over here and analyze all those. And again, there's a number of these. Let's say I want to shift, analyze. Those should now be set to 0 because I now removed all of those those object styles, but they're still there, right? So notice that it's showing just the imported styles. Now I have the ability to go ahead and say, you know what? Let's do all of these because they're no longer there, and say delete. So now I've got rid of all those object styles. And so this is cleaned. If I go back to object style, now I have just the ones that were part of Revit. And again, I have my line styles that were just part of Revit. And if I go back over here to my manage and go to object styles, you'll notice that the import category no longer exists there, and that's nice and clean. And under the model objects, again, all the information is nice and clean. I don't have any extra subcategories that were created by linking or importing this in and then exploding it. So that's just kind of showing you in a very simple example how you would go and clean up some of this information, because just by deleting the CAD file, it doesn't necessarily mean you're deleting all of the associated object styles or line patterns. And a lot of times you'll think that you deleted the CAD file, but then you'll go over here and you'll look at the imported categories and it'll list a whole bunch of things down here that are now part of your project that you're like, how do I get rid of those things? So StyleManager helps you remove all that information and keep your project very clean and very organized. Now that was just looking at, like I said, linking in kind of a basic AutoCAD file, but there are times when it's even a little bit more complicated, because what you're doing is you're linking in content like a family, and then that family may have, let's say, AutoCAD linked into it. Like a good example is a title block. You may say, oh, I'm going to take this title block RFA, I'm going to bring it into my project and everything's fine, but all of a sudden you're getting all these styles that don't match your standards. It may be because that particular title block had within it a nested family that might have a symbol that came from AutoCAD. So we can review all that information. So again, in this case, what we're doing is reviewing the model objects here on the tab. You can look at the imported objects, and it's going to show you that I've got, several, like both the AutoCAD file, but also the imports and families as well. So again, just to sort of reiterate the fact that I'm sort of focusing on object styles here, and that I can, untick the object styles that are the built-in ones to Revit and just look at the imported styles. So you'll see here I have, this underlay.dwg, and as I scroll down, I've got imports and families. Again, these are things that came in from an RFA file. And then I also have other AutoCAD files that got linked in. Now, a quick way to do this, I'm going to double click on this just to analyze. And if you look at the parent, which in that case is the dark, where it says kind of in italics DWG, that's basically the master, like sort of object style for that particular AutoCAD file. And so you can see that if let's say that was 0, right, all the other sub categories would also be 0. So that's a quick way. But in this case, there's actually other subcategories that are being used. And I'm going to go ahead and show, and I can open up the view where that toilet layout AutoCAD file is shown. And again, this might have been partially exploded. Maybe I want to replace that with some content, or I just want to see, first of all, where it is. In my previous example that I showed you was very simple. I only had the one. But in this particular case, you might have thousands of these and you don't know where they are. So you can double click and open up the view that shows where that's at. And then, like I said, the imports and families is nice. I'm going to do a search key here and just look for imports. So now it doesn't get the LinkedIn or imported AutoCAD files. It's just looking at the imports in the families that may be in title blocks or maybe in pieces of furniture and so forth. So again, you can see that, oh, this was used in plumbing fixtures. It was also used in specialty equipment. There's a presentation desk. So you can understand exactly how these families are being used. And then you can start to drill down and see, and actually open up the family. So in this particular case, that specialty equipment presentation desk, I'm going to open up the family, and I see that there are other families that have been loaded into it. So it's a nested family. There's a furniture. And so finally, when I open up that furniture stool, right? And I look at the object styles here, and I'm looking for that BMCD2, right? And finally, I'm actually going to the element that is within that chair, and you see there over on the properties palette, there's BMCD2. So I sort of had to drill down multiple levels to find out where that was. And in fact, I can fix it right here on the family, or I can go back to the project and I can fix it at the project level as well. So if I replace that with a different object style, it's going to then basically change that particular family. It updates it within the project. Now, if that family still exists as an RFA out on the disk, we'll need to update that or edit that family and then save it off. So what it's doing now when it's updating the family information, it's updating it only within this project. But then again, like I said, you could save off that family so that you would not have that sort of being reinfected or re-imported every particular time. And notice that the top category there is that imports and families. So what I'm going to do here is look at that and actually merge that BMCD2 to the top level imports and families, just so that they're all maybe the same. And so now that's been changed in that particular that RFA file, right? That's loaded into this project. So like I said, the real key there is we're looking at it on the project level, whereas if you wanted one more step where you wanted to share this RFA file, you'd want to save that off as an RFA so that other people could use it and would not have the object style that was embedded from the AutoCAD import. So we feel that you shouldn't just hope for the best, that Ideate StyleManager gives you these forensic tools to understand why something is, or where something is being used exactly, and being able to review where it's being used in a family, in a group, in an element, in a detail view, and then be able to, if you so desire, merge that to an approved standard or delete if it's not being used for the object style, you can go ahead and remove that. And I see I've got a couple questions here, so I know I've got just a few minutes. So the question, Dan had a really good question. So on lines within groups, so if the line is within the group, we're going to need to, we can basically modify, or I should say isolate that information that is within the group, but we're not able to change, I guess, some of the information we're not able to change depending on how Revit is creating that particular group. But there are some instances where you may have to isolate the group first and then open up the group editor and then be able to make those changes. And then there's also a question about exporting back to CAD with the same layers that were imported. So if I understand that correctly, I guess once I'm cleaned up, like in my example here, right? This is now a detail that's a section detail that exists within Revit. And so these things are now going to be on wide lines. I would have to specify in my export if I wanted to go back to a particular AutoCAD layer and name that layer when I'm creating the export from this view. If I understand that question correctly. Oh, and there's another good one by Steve saying, what do the different colors mean? I didn't explain that here, but if I go back to StyleManager, basically what the colors mean is that there are duplicates. So if I go ahead and shift and analyze, if I say isolate duplicates, basically this lines beyond is a line weight of 1 with an RGB color of 000 and a pattern of solid. Well, thin lines is the exact same definition. So it's just kind of alerting you, saying that these two are the same definition. You may or may not want them. I mean, in this case, it kind of makes sense to have a lines beyond and a thin lines, but just to let you know that those are the same. So like when it comes to patterns, this is another good one where you can say isolate duplicates, and like this dash 330 seconds is the same as this dash 330 seconds. They're both the same pattern. There's a demolished, there's a hidden, line pattern that are, again, defined the same. And the same way with the fill patterns, you can isolate duplicates. And there's a wood 2 drafting and another wood 2 drafting. There's a gypsum and sand that are basically the same definition. So those color coding allows you to kind of quickly see if the definition is the same. And sometimes you may, like in this case, it's okay to have gypsum and sand be the same definition. But maybe, like, why do you have wood? Why are there 2 wood draftings? That doesn't make sense. And so you really want to see, well, let's go ahead and shift this and analyze. And like this one's not being used. So let's just say I want to delete that completely. And then now I only have the one. So if I isolate or unisolate the duplicates, it's no longer listed. But that's a great question. Another question from Vita is, how does it work in regards to work sets? Well, you do have to have the permissions to change elements. So we've done a lot of work with work sets and work sharing. So if you have, let's say, one thing that is, let's say, one CAD file that is locked by work sharing, and you just made a change to 50 things, it will change all those 50 things, but that one CAD file, it will say, hey, this is locked by work sharing. I can't make a change to that. So it doesn't stop the change for the other elements. It's just going to alert you that it didn't make the change for that one element or series of elements because it was locked by work sharing. So hopefully that answers that particular question. All right, so I know I promised I'd be about 30 minutes, and I know I can talk a long time here, so it's a little bit after the top of the hour. So I just wanted to reiterate that, we have the outstanding support. I would encourage everyone to look at our online classes and videos, specifically if you're interested in Ideate StyleManager. We have a number of videos on that. And you can download a trial of Ideate StyleManager. If you go to ideatesoftware.com, Ideate StyleManager, download. And I will say a caveat, though, is that it's not a full trial in the sense of we're giving you access to several of the selections. So what we do is on the Ideate StyleManager trial, you have access to materials and material assets. And that, as I said, they all work basically the same way. So it gives you a flavor of how they work. And so by reviewing those 2 pieces of information, you can see how the object styles, line patterns, fill patterns, and the others operate as well. So all that information is available on our website, but just to let you know that the trial is sort of restricted to materials and material appearance assets. So with that, I think that, like I said, I'm about 5 minutes after the hour, so I really want to thank you very much. I hope you go online and find out more about Ideate software and download a trial of Ideate StyleManager. And again, if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to contact me at richard.taylor@ideatesoftware.com, or like I said, you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.